Hello, I'm Dennis Lyons, the editor of the Daily Item, and we're happy to have Fred Keller, the Republican candidate for the 12th Congressional District race, the race to fill Tom Marino's vacated seat. Fred, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, and I just want to thank all the good readers and the people that are watching of the Daily Item for the opportunity to communicate, about our campaign and what it means. Really, it's about the values of the people of the 12th Congressional District, and the forum here to let people know the differences between the two candidates and their campaigns. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important. I think that's really the purpose of why we're here. What my values are, what I stand for, and what the values of the people of the 12th Congressional District are, as the Republican nominee to run in the race, and then that, of course, of the other candidate in the race, and some of the things we got to say as each of us first becoming a nominee, which really, I think, points out the differences in our campaign.
Sure. Okay. So what we've done, and we were actually asking the exact same questions we asked of your opponent, Mark Friedenberg, last Thursday when he was in this very same room. And we're going to do it by topic, and we're going to start with healthcare. Healthcare, I think I heard one of the Democratic presidential candidates say earlier this week that that's the one question she gets the most from her constituents. So let's talk about healthcare. Let's set aside the imperfection of the current system. We know there's imperfections in it, and there's a temptation to be partisan on that topic. I'd like to start out by asking you, what specific changes do you think need to be made to give Americans better health care?
Okay. The first thing I guess I'd like to start off with, because I know people have been trying to define my position on health care, and my position is that first and foremost, we need to cover pre-existing conditions. Then our plan also needs to have transparency and competition. A single-payer system will not provide the level of care people need. Just because somebody is covered does not mean that they get care. And that's part of what happens when we talk about Health EPA, which was the approved method under the Corbett administration from Department of Human Services in Washington, D.C., which I supported. I supported a plan that would actually have given people choice in where they could get their health care. And again, it was approved by the Obama administration's Department of Human Services. So I know it's been said that I didn't support helping people get health care. Actually, I did support a better method rather than just saying, here's a single-payer system that we're going to force you onto. There was a system set up where people were given vouchers where they could buy their insurance for what they needed, what their health care needs were, and actually go to a doctor that would actually take that, rather than some of the issues we were having with physicians not taking Medicaid or not taking new Medicaid patients. So I think it's important for us to know that just saying that we're going to cover people does not mean those people are going to receive care. So again, what we need to do is we need to cover pre-existing conditions with whatever we do. That's first and foremost. But then I think a system where we can have some competition, we can have some transparency, that will actually drive the improvements that we need to see to make healthcare affordable for people and make sure that they get the care they need.
Is there a specific Republican Party plan? There was always all this talk about repeal and replace. But the repeal part turned out to be more of a challenge than I think was expected. But the replace part, I never got the sense that there was a very well-detailed, here's what we would replace the Affordable Care Act with. Is there, in your, as far as you know, a Republican actual plan?
I was not part of the discussion in D.C. when they were having those things, but I was part of the discussion in Harrisburg when we talked about the Health EPA. And I guess I would look at some of that as the model of what we could build upon to make sure people had the opportunity to select what they needed. So, as far as the rhetoric people were putting out there in the national level, I mean, there was plenty of that on both sides. Yeah. I mean, when the American people were sold this whole bill of goods, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your health care plan, and you're going to save $2,500. We all know how that turned out. It was a bunch of stuff that people dreamed up, and I think some people, even Nancy Pelosi said, well, we had to pass it to know what's in it. Well, that's not good public policy. So, you can talk about the Republican plan and you can talk about the other plan, but what we did in Pennsylvania, I thought was different, and even DHS saw the value in it, or they wouldn't have approved it. The fact that you give people choices, and let them choose their health care. It's much better than just a single payer system where the government tells you what's best for you and your family.
There's been some court action, and there's a possibility that there could be a vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act and effectively end the protection for those people with pre-existing conditions that you mentioned that we need to maintain. Would you vote for a plan to replace the ACA if such protection was not in place?
Well, you mentioned the court hearing that's coming up, and there is a court hearing coming up. But what Congress has done, quite frankly, in the fact of calling for more investigations and tying up time on stuff they shouldn't be working on, because we did have the Attorney General go through the Mueller report, we had the special counsel, we had the Attorney General saying there was no collusion. And here's the difference in our campaigns. My opponent, was reported in your paper, wants to continue investigations. That was in your paper. He wants to go down there and continue looking in the rearview mirror. What I want to do is I want to go down there and work with Congress and solve these problems versus waiting to have a court decision come out and tell us how to do it.
Can you elaborate a little bit on how the choice thing would work? You made it clear that you're not in favor of a single payer system. How would the choice system work as you would see it?
Well, as I would see it, and there's many ways. I know there's already some tax credits for health insurance plans, and you can build on some of those things. But again, and I can I'll tell you why I'm so big on choice, if I can go ahead and do that, okay? Because there are countries that have single payer systems. And over in the UK, there's people that can't get cataract surgery as adults. And that story just came out earlier in the month. Then you also look, and I point to this because to me, choice is important in making sure that you don't have a government controlling the health care, whether you get health care or not, or what kind of health care you get. I looked to two infants, an infant and a toddler, Alfie Evans and Charlie Gard, who were over in the UK where they have a single payer system, socialized medicine. And the doctors told their parents that those children were not going to survive. The parents could have gone somewhere else for care. In the case of Charlie Gard, he could have come to the United States. There was a doctor that was willing to treat him. And because the doctors said they weren't going to live, they were not allowed to take them out of the country. And they were told they had to disconnect their children. A government judge told them they had to disconnect their children from life support. My son, when he was 3 years old, was in Geisinger, and the doctors told us, your son is not going to live. They said it's not a 50% mortality rate, not a 95% mortality rate, it's a 100% mortality rate. When are you going to finally disconnect him from life support? He was on a ventilator for 26 days. In any other nation where the government controls my son's health care, we would have been told to take him off that ventilator. But because we had choices and we could determine our son's health care, he is 27 years old today and works for that hospital system that saved his life. That's why I will oppose socialized single-payer medicine.
All right, so I work at the Daily Item, and I have maybe 4 or 5 choices that I can pick from, but the deductibles are pretty high, and the expenses are equally high. What can we do about that? What can we do about bringing down the costs of these choices that you want us to have?
Well, again, I think competition is a big part of that, and some of that would deal with whether you're talking about pharmaceuticals, because there's deductibles for pharmaceuticals, there's deductibles for plans, so there's a whole variety of things. But again, the transparency is the biggest thing, because the first thing in improving anything, in controlling it, is measuring where you are. So when you go for healthcare, if you have choices and you know what the costs are going to be for those things and some of those things, I think that's a good start in making sure that people understand the cost and can start to make some of those informed choices.
And one last question on this topic. Do you get a sense, if you are elected and you are suddenly in Washington, do you get a sense that this is a priority right now? I haven't heard much lately about what is next for healthcare.
Well, again, the sense I get is when I campaign and I'm talking to the people of the 12th Congressional District, is if I'm elected and sent to Washington, the first things that I'm going to work on, in the sense that I'm going to get, is what's important to the people of the 12th Congressional District.
And healthcare is number one.
And healthcare, actually, people want a better life for their families. They want to make sure they have family-sustaining jobs. Their children can get family-sustaining jobs, and that's all part of quality of life. But it's a quality of life that the people of the 12th Congressional District want to define and not have their government define for them.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to immigration. So much of the focus on immigration policy over the last 2 years has been on erecting physical barriers, a wall, if you will. How big a part of the solution to our immigration issues could be solved by building these kinds of barriers, do you think?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say about immigration, and I've said this many times because it's where we stand with this. The late Jack Kemp is attributed with this quote: "We must close the back door of illegal immigration so that we can keep open the front door of legal immigration." I mean, when you look at what we should be doing, and it's not just one thing that's going to solve it. I mean, we have problems with people overstaying visas. We have problems with, having enough resources on the ground to deal with it. A physical barrier where it makes sense, a wall, yes, I would support that. I don't know how many people have been to the U.S.-Mexican border. I was when I was a kid because I lived in southern Arizona. And again, as a nation, it's our duty to the citizens that live here to make sure that their public safety is a fundamental function of government, and protecting our borders is part of that. And again, that doesn't mean that we don't include people, we don't let people into our country. It's just that we should know the people that are coming in. So build a wall, if that's what it takes, yes, that could be part of the solution, but there are many things that go along with that. And I know, and I've seen the news stories where my opponent has been quoted, not a cent for the wall. I won't put the expletive that was put in with that. But that's another difference between the two campaigns. I'm here, and it's not that we don't have sympathy for people that are trying to leave a nation where they're in trouble, but that's creating a lot of the problems because the United States hasn't addressed that southern border, and people are being trafficked, and there's people being taken advantage of. So when you look at the policies of the United States, it's good for the United States, and it's good for the people that are at risk traveling to our southern border because we have not addressed those issues.
There was some conversation last week in which President Trump seemed to be indicating he would be looking to ship people who were coming into the country illegally to sanctuary cities. What's your thought on that?
Well, if people that are running these sanctuary cities think it's okay to have the people come to areas. See, this tends to be the point of some of the people that are advocating for not protecting the southern border, to let people come into it. But yet when the president wants to send them to their backyard, well, not my backyard. The whole point is when you look at it, and when you're looking at the safety of not just American citizens, okay? And that's the point I want to make. And as an elected representative in Pennsylvania to the 85th District, my first responsibility is to represent the people of the 85th Legislative District. Anybody that's elected to Congress, their first responsibility is to represent the people that they're elected to represent. That doesn't mean you don't care about other people. The point is, you're elected to represent those people. You're elected to make sure you stand up for America's safety first. So I don't see a problem with when people don't want to do that. Why don't they want them in their city, but they want them somewhere else? And I guess that's a question that should be asked to the people that don't want them in their city.
Well,
if they don't want more people in their city, then why don't they enforce the laws we already have?
Some of the people who are in sanctuary cities have actually said, "Bring it on, bring them to our city."
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that some of the problems with immigration involve people overstaying their visas. What can we do about that?
Well, again, that again is reforming how some of that works, and the length of time a person is here before they have to report back to their country of origin and so on. Again, I think that's going to take some resources, and it's probably the fact that I would just say some additional resources, and maybe looking at the way that people have to report they apply for their visas, and the amount of visas that we give probably is another part of it.
Yeah, because it's probably close to half of the unauthorized immigrants in this country are people who have come in originally legally.
But here's the point. I will say that and let's take care of that issue. Okay, but when they came here legally, we at least knew where they were coming from and who they were. Mm-hmm. When they're coming here illegally across our border, see, and I think that's the point people miss. That border is our nation. When they're coming across there, they're not checked by anybody. At least by somebody that comes in on a visa. I will say they at least applied for a visa and were verified who they are. When you come across our southern border and there's no check at all, you don't know who the people are.
Yeah. So what do we do with the people who were born here of illegal immigrants, the so-called dreamers?
Well, again, when you look at that, and I think there's been a good solution to that, and the president wanted to actually let the people that were the dreamers that came in here that were born stay, and then some people wanted to obstruct, and just because I think Donald Trump is the one that wanted to do it. Here's the point that happens in D.C. and sometimes in Harrisburg too, and I don't let that get into what my decision making and how I behave. Mm-hmm. People say, well, they don't want to let this person get a win, or they want to let that person get a win. It's not about an individual getting a win. It's about what the win is for the people that you represent. Those are the people that should be getting the win. Not any one party, not any one person. But and you guys know how I behave. There's two reasons things don't get done. And I had a friend tell me this years ago, pride and ego. When it comes to me, there's no pride and ego. It's about getting out, listening to what's important to people, and taking those values to our government. Whether I do it as a state representative and how I've behaved my entire time as that, or if I'm elected to Congress, I will behave the same way.
Right, so just to be clear, assuming they've done nothing illegal, the children of people who came in here who were born after their parents came in, you feel that an accommodation should be made to allow them to stay?
I think we could work something out.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go to Fred now to talk a little bit about the budget and the deficit.
Fred, the Congressional Budget Office said the federal budget deficit is about $900 billion, will exceed $1 trillion beginning in 2020. I know you as a numbers guy. Is this a matter of a concern for you and the American people?
Well, again, anytime we have to go farther into debt without a plan to reverse that, should be concerning. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, we need to look at our finances, and but here's one important thing. If we have an economy where we create more jobs and more people are going to work every day and more people are contributing tax dollars to the Treasury, not raising the rate of taxes, but actually having more people participating, I think it goes a long way into looking at those numbers. And I would be careful, because some of those numbers are static numbers, and it's not a dynamic model where they say, well, if you cut taxes, this is what we're going to lose based upon what the model looks already. But if you cut the taxes and you have expanded economic growth, then you got to account for that. So I would just say we need to make sure when we're doing the comparisons, we're looking at a dynamic model.
What specific cuts do you think need to be considered? Should the age to receive Social Security be increased? Medicare benefits be changed?
Well, again, there's a couple things where my opposition's tried to put words in my mouth or say things that aren't true. I would not advocate for touching the benefits that anybody has earned or the benefits that are in place. And I know and I'll point to Congressman Barletta's piece of legislation from 2017, I believe it was the Verify First Act, where it says before we start giving tax credits to people for certain things, we need to first verify that they're eligible for them, the Social Security numbers are right, and those kind of things. So I think there's a lot of things that we could clean up in the process of how we do things to make sure that the programs we have, that people are eligible for those programs. So again, I don't know that it's a matter of cutting anything. An economy that's growing, where more people participate and pay more, or the Treasury collects more because you have more people participating, is really the key to success in this. I don't think that you need to go changing benefits or cutting benefits or any of those kind of things. I've never advocated for any of those things in Social Security. I think it's just outrageous that anybody that wants to try and score political points would accuse another person of doing that.
Do you think tax reform will eventually stimulate the economy and start decreasing the deficit?
Well, if you want to just look at employment numbers, Pennsylvania's got like the lowest employment rate just came out. We're under 4% in Pennsylvania, and we've got historically low unemployment rates. So if you want to look at that as a measure, because I know a lot of people go to the unemployment rate as a measure, so you can look at that and say there are more people working now than have in Pennsylvania. And let's look at the record of what's caused that, and that's some of what I've worked on at the state level, because our state economy is doing better, and I know the governor's even said that. But that's after 4 years of me being in the General Assembly with a governor that wanted to raise taxes how many times, and we stopped raising taxes, and Pennsylvania is doing better. We're collecting more revenue. So the policy of letting people control more of their money. You know, again, a lot of these policies that people want to increase taxes, want to do these things, want single-payer health care, want the Green New Deal. These policies where the government would confiscate more of your money, whoever controls more of your money controls more of your actions. And I think the people that earn the money should control more of it. And the best way to do that is make sure our tax rates are low and people can work and do what they need to do. And it's evidenced. It's evidenced in Pennsylvania's economy because we didn't allow the governor to increase taxes and take more money from working citizens or retired citizens. And I think what the president did and what Congress did, we're seeing that in our employment numbers nationally. So, you know, I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that the money that we're allocating for services is actually reaching that service and not getting caught up in a bureaucracy down in Washington, D.C.
Overall, do you think the middle class has benefited from the tax cuts as much as the wealthy and corporations?
Well, I will say this. I see a lot of middle class people, and they're telling me they paid less taxes, fewer taxes. And you just, again, look at our economy, a low unemployment rate, you know, more people working, real increase in real wages for the first time in how many years? I mean, that's the numbers we're seeing. They're not my numbers. They're the government's numbers. So when you look at that happening, and you look at the effects of what people are seeing, and in fact, I just talked to a businessman the other day, small businessman right here in central Pennsylvania, that's expanding his business because his other small businesses are expanding. I talked to a guy, we were up at Norson Industries in Williamsport, right outside of Williamsport, and they're doing well. Why are they doing well? Because he can invest in machinery now because of the tax bill. So there's a lot of things that have helped Pennsylvania's small businesses.
But part of the criticism has been as far as the wealthy and corporates receiving, maybe doing a little better than the middle class.
Well, I think that's why we need to make those tax cuts permanent for the middle class. They shouldn't expire. So, you know, and everybody wants to put a face on a corporation, and everybody needs to pay the taxes that they're supposed to pay. But, you know, we can take a look at everybody's 401ks, and if you want to look at your retirement, what do 401ks invest in? They invest in businesses. I mean, Pennsylvania State Education Association, which benefits middle-class people, their teachers, their school employees, they own a million shares of ExxonMobil, 500,000 shares of Chevron, Chesapeake, Anadarko, Capital Oil and Gas. We can talk about all the corporations they own. The people that own those corporations are the shareholders, and a lot of times that's pension plans, which to me is middle class.
Okay, we're going to turn it over to Rick Dandis, and this portion will be just a little bit different than when we spoke to your opponent because the Mueller report had not yet come out when we spoke to him. So you get to comment on something that you've now seen. So Rick, take it away.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the Mueller report. I just want to jump back to one thing that was unclear about when you were talking to Dennis. Would you or would you not vote to repeal ACA if a plan was not in place? If you were in Congress and that came before you, would you vote yes or no if there was no plan in place?
Well, I don't think anybody's saying we're saying we need to fix the Affordable Care
No,
Act.
the president is saying that we'll have a plan after the next election.
I think the president's wanted to work on a plan for a long period of time, and there's people that are stuck on obstructing the president on getting things done based upon a report that we've been waiting for 2.5 years and spent over $25 million on, and people have hung their hat on that, and rather than getting off their behinds in Congress and fixing these issues that are important, now Congress is subpoenaing more records, and there's no collusion. That's been determined by the report. So again, I don't think we need to wait for a court decision, Rick. I think Congress needs to get off their behind and fix this. It's been costing American families choices in their own health care. And it's been costing them a lot of money. They were promised you can keep your doctor, they were promised you can keep your health care plan, and they were promised that it would save them $2,500 in the average family. It hasn't happened. We need to fix it.
Okay, I was just wondering because you had talked about pre-existing conditions.
And we need to make sure any plan that we come up with covers pre-existing conditions.
Okay, we'll move over to the Mueller report. It came out Thursday, but it was redacted. Do you think that Americans should get to see the full unredacted report?
You know, Rick, the report's the report. Not being in, not having security clearance to see what those redacted things say. I guess if I had Hillary's server, I guess I could see it all. But anyhow, that's supposed to be a joke, guys. Laugh a little
As a
bit.
jab. Okay.
But anyhow, I can't. I can't. Since I don't have security clearance to see that, I think that whatever it would not be in violation of national security interests. Put the report out. Publish the darn report. What do we need to talk about? We've had a special counsel that said no indictments, okay, on collusion, and we've had an attorney general that said there was no collusion. I don't know. I mean, first it was there was collusion, then we had a special counsel, then we had to trust the special counsel. Now we don't like what the special counsel said, so now we got to investigate more. Put the report out, let everybody look at it, and let's move on and get the work done. I am not hearing from the people in the 12th Congressional District that they want more investigations and they want more reports and they want more stuff. They want things done that are going to positively impact their lives.
Okay, well, my question is about the Mueller report. So, do you think Attorney General Barr's summary told enough of the story?
I think that Special Counsel Mueller, when he said no indictment on collusion, told the story.
Okay. Do you believe the Russian meddling affected the 2016 election?
Do I think it changed any votes? Do I think they hacked in the voting machines? I mean, there has. I don't think it changed any votes. I think that there's some people that are upset that the American people spoke and voted for a president, and some people didn't like the way it turned out. So,
Well, the report did say that there was an attempt to influence voters, whether they did or not. How would you deal with that now?
well, I think a lot of
That's going to continue, I would assume.
I think, and again, if this was such an issue, I think the previous administration should also take it seriously, Rick, quite frankly, because this isn't the first time that they've tried to do these kind of things. We need to make sure that we don't have foreign countries trying to impact our elections. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And that's not a partisan issue. We need to make sure that we don't have people trying to determine the outcomes of our elections, period. And I'll say that. And whatever we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, I would support.
Okay. Let's talk about mandated Pennsylvania voting machines. Governor Wolf wants to have a paper trail. Should the federal government help offset this cost, which is significant to small counties, particularly in this district?
Well, yeah, some of that, and if you understand how the voting machines work, and I don't understand why the governor is going to decertify the voting machines in Snyder County because they have a paper trail to them. I mean, I don't know. In Snyder County, you get a paper ballot, you color in the ovals, and you run it through an optical scanner. But it's my understanding that Snyder County's machines are going to be decertified too. So I think we should probably look at that whole thing and say, if we've already got one that works, why would we decertify, just with a broad stroke, decertify all of those? Counties are ultimately responsible for running the election. The state has a part in it. And if there's some way that we need help in getting that done, I'm open to looking at all the solutions, putting all the solutions on the table and seeing what works best.
All right. People want their quality of life, as you say, to be the job one. What can, given the circumstances, given where we are with the, I don't know, it's a very difficult situation that you would be entering into Washington. What can the two parties get together on? Do you have a sense, as you contemplate the possibility of being part of this, are there issues that you think there's room to make something happen that everybody can agree on?
I think when you treat everybody with respect, first and foremost, which is how I behave, you can have discussions that sometimes you may not agree on. And the thing I look at is, you talk about people not agreeing. I don't always agree with my wife, but I love her dearly, and we can get things solved. So the first thing is communication, and honest communication, and not trying to put words in other people's mouths. I think is the first thing where we need to start. So the things that we can agree on, I would hope that we could solve the healthcare issue before a court decision would come out. I mean, really, if we again don't focus on the things that divide, but focus on the things we agree on, that would be one. Infrastructure is huge.
Yeah.
When you look at infrastructure, it's not just roads and bridges, and I supported that in Pennsylvania, by the way. I supported, and here again, there's part of my record coming in to support something that benefits lives all around the district I represent, the Commonwealth, and I would approach things the same way. But our infrastructure needs to be not just the roads and bridges, but broadband internet access. And here's another one that people aren't talking about, and that's pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had Russian gas last year come into Boston Harbor. And why would we be transferring? We just talked about Russians meddling in our elections because they have resources. Well, why are we buying gas that originated in Russia? Why are we transferring wealth to Russia? Or why are our allies transferring wealth? Why don't we put pipelines in so we can collect this gas and we can sell this gas to our allies and bankrupt these people, these bad players that don't share our interests, so they don't meddle in our elections. So infrastructure is a huge issue where I think we can get things moving along. And wouldn't that be a heck of a boom for Pennsylvania in the 12th Congressional District if we could get all this natural gas we have to market?
Fred? Is working across the aisle still possible? Are we too polarized? And we get the feeling that some believe such a gesture is a sign of weakness.
Well, I'll go to my own personal experience, and I'll bring it in here locally, if you don't mind. I've worked across the aisle. In fact, the Auditor General, Eugene D. Pasquale, I think in a thing last year in support of me, said, I've worked with Fred in Harrisburg to get things done. And there's a Republican and there's a Democrat where we've worked together to get things done. So I think it's a matter of people, and I don't think that you don't compromise on values, you don't compromise on anything else. You look at public policy and you work together toward a common goal. So I don't think that's a sign of weakness. When you don't do that, I think that's a sign of weakness, when you're unwilling to work on things. Now, again, that doesn't mean you compromise values, but when you look at what moves the ball forward and makes life better for people, I think we should do it. So can I work across the aisle with people? Absolutely. Does that mean that at the end of the day, when you do that, the people are the ones that really get the benefit of that? The people that are represented by the elected officials really get the benefit of that? So yeah, there's things we can work across the aisle on, and I don't look at that as it shouldn't be labeled as either good or bad. It should be labeled as what we should do. So,
Fred, do you support reform for the way congressional districts are mapped?
there's a lot of things, and I know Pennsylvania has come under a lot of scrutiny for this. And again, I'll go back to sort of bring it local for the whole group. Changing from what we have now to a commission like is proposed in some of the legislation that's out there doesn't take the politics out of it, because you're already registered with one party or another or an independent, so that the politics are still in it. You could end up making it worse than some people already perceive. I'm open to having that discussion. In fact, I threw a suggestion out last year that when we were talking about this citizens commission, why don't you make a commission out of county commissioners? Because that would make sure that it's somebody that's elected to the office that's answerable to the people, rather than creating a commission of people that aren't answerable to the public, but the commissioners are. The commissioners understand why certain areas should or should not be put together based upon how they manage their counties. So, if we want to have that discussion, I think we could take a look at it. But I think one way of doing it is making sure maybe the county commissioners or somebody, an organization like that, is somebody that's elected to office, might work. The important thing I want to say about what happened with the last congressional map, which doesn't get put out there a lot, is that was Senate Bill 1249. And it takes 102 votes in the state house to pass any piece of legislation. There were only 100 Republican votes for that. 36 Democrats voted for that. Almost 40% of the Democrat caucus voted for that map. But it's been characterized as something that Republicans pushed through. And when we talk about that, and we think that just because it's done not by politicians but out in the public, you're taking the politics out of it, there's a lot of politics that has been put into the narrative on what happened with that map. So to be fair, We need to make sure that we understand how that map was created, rather than just throwing out political sound bites to make it sound like, well, the Republicans just rammed that through. No, they didn't. The Democrats, if it was a bad map in 2011, could have stopped it. But 40% of the House Democrat caucus, or almost 40% of the House Democrat caucus, voted for that map. So if we want to have honest, open debate about redistricting, I'm more than willing to do that. But let's put aside all the talking points and let's really get down to the issues.
Okay, Fred, we just had the 20th anniversary of the shooting in Columbine this past weekend. We had the city of Pittsburgh decide to start moving forward with its own gun laws in light of the Temple shooting. Are there still gun laws that need to be put forward, or are there enough gun laws already that just need to be enforced?
First off, I would like to say one thing. We have a Second Amendment of our Constitution, and that is the right to keep and bear arms. And that amendment being in place ensures that all our other amendments are protected. Okay, so I do support the Second Amendment. I also support Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution that says the right to bear arms in defense of oneself or the state shall not be questioned. I've never called on a ban for any class of firearms. Okay, my opponent has called for a ban on some firearms. But understanding the importance of that right, which is just as important as our right to free speech, our right to assemble, all the other rights that we told our government are our rights, not our government telling us. And look at the things that the state police already check for and are done. And my record of making sure things are done properly and our laws are enforced was House Bill 2060 last year that I supported. And I think that just goes volumes to show that I'm responsible in the way I approach public policy. So I think we need to enforce the laws we already have. Banning firearms from law-abiding citizens does not solve the problem, because we need to stop focusing on the instrument one uses to inflict harm, violence, or terror on another person, and focus on the act.
Okay. A couple other kind of lightning round type of questions, Fred. Should all presidential candidates be required to release their tax returns?
If it's not a part of the Constitution, I don't think that's a requirement to become president.
It's not now, should it be?
No.
Okay, there you go.
Because if somebody, and here again, that's another one of these things that people are using to distract. If the president did something illegal, the Internal Revenue Service will prosecute it, okay? So again, let's stop these diversionary things that prevent us from doing exactly what Fred asked about, working together. All those kind of things do are a noise factor that prevent us from doing it. And again, people calling for more investigations and more of these things, if somebody has done something wrong, they need to be held accountable for it. But again, if the president did something wrong, I'm sure the Internal Revenue Service would have been all over that.
Let's talk a little bit about climate. I know the Green New Deal has gotten a lot of negative attention, and probably in some degree rightfully so. But is there a problem with climate change that we need to do more about? Well,
and let's talk a little bit about the climate. And again, I'm going to go back to my record and the things I've done, even in business, okay? When I managed the factory in Beavertown, we actually got a Business of the Bay Award for the things that we did to be responsible. Also, as a state rep, we got money from the state for the property to protect the watershed over here along the Susquehanna River in Union Township, Union County. And so we look at some of those things, the recycling. I worked alongside my constituents to keep people from burning tires in Union County. Okay, so that's my personal record. Am I recognizing that we have a responsibility as human beings to make sure we do what we can? Now, having said that, the Green New Deal, when I've read it, I know that probably doesn't shock you guys, knowing that I read stuff and I do my homework, okay? That's what I do. I don't just say things. I read the Green New Deal, and it's going to cost, and if you look at everything, it's going to cost $93 trillion, $600,000 for every Pennsylvania family. There again, that's about controlling more of people's money and not having them have the ability to control the things themselves and do things which are responsible. So again, while we are responsible, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure we take care of our environment. The things like the Green New Deal, and again, we can talk about that's the difference in these two campaigns. As candidate, when I was the nominee, when I came out of that meeting as the nominee, I said, these are the things I want to work on. And one was making sure that I listened to the people of the 12th Congressional District and took their values to Washington, D.C. My opponent immediately came out and said he's looking forward to working on a Green New Deal and socialized medicine. So that's a difference between our two campaigns.
Fred?
How do you rate the job the president has done so far, and is there anything specific that you have disagreed with?
The job the president's done, I'm going to say this way. I see some people that have these I resist bumper stickers on their car. And while you can disagree with somebody, I can't resist putting America's interests first and jobs. I can't do that. I think I give the president passing marks. I think he, in spite of the people that have been attacking him, first with the Mueller investigation and still want to continue investigations, and now they want to look at his income tax returns and all these things. I think he's done a remarkable job considering everybody that's been banging on him with all these noise factors around. If we now get beyond that, now that we've had the special counsel's report that said no indictments, and with the attorney general that said no collusion, and the IRS, if there's something, they'll come up with it, but I don't think we need to focus on that. If we work together to get things done, I think we can even do a lot better in the upcoming years than the president has done in the last 2.5 or 3 years.
Is there anything you've disagreed with?
When I look at the president's performance, again, I'm not here to be critical of people. Let's work on what we agree on. I'll put it this way. If there was something that I would have a difference of opinion with the president on, I would sit down and have the discussion. I know sometimes he's proposed in his budget the CDBG, which is the Community Development Block Grant money. I think that money is important because the county commissioners can determine then where it needs to go. So if that's a discussion I might have with the president and say, hey, let's talk about this. But again, I'm not gonna pick apart the president's job. I think Ronald Reagan said when somebody agrees with you, what was it, 60 or 80% of the time they're a supporter. So I think the president's done, in view of all the things he's had to face and the criticism that he's had to come under, are we better off now in America than we were 3 years ago? Look at the unemployment rate in Pennsylvania. Look at the nation. More people working, and it doesn't matter what group you want to pick apart and analyze the data. More people working, more people. America. We don't have missiles being lobbed over the Pacific at the United States. We don't have those threats. So I guess when I look at all those things, do I think the president's done a good job? You're darn right I do.
Rick? Take us
Okay, so
home.
let me just get this straight. You just said, do you agree with the president 60 to 80% of the time?
Oh, I didn't say that.
What'd you say?
I said Ronald Reagan said that when you agree with somebody else, I think it might have been 60 or 80% of the time. I don't remember the exact quote, but that they're you're supporting that person. What I said is I think the president's done a pretty darn good job considering all the noise factor that's been going on around, that continues to go on even after we've had an attorney general that said no collusion and a special prosecutor or special counsel that said no indictments.
I stand corrected, Fred. Okay, kind of the last question here. Fred, I've basically followed you since you first got elected.
Well, thank you for that.
And one of the things I consistently hear about your constituents is your accessibility. Fred is accessible to us, sits down at our table. How the heck can you do that from Washington? Why do you want to be a U.S. congressman?
Well,
Given the animosity,
I think if you don't let those things wear on you, talk about animosity. I don't look at that as I don't look at that poorly, and I think it's a matter of perspective. Why do I want to go to Congress?
Yeah.
I tell you what, I was that poor kid. And for a period of time when my dad's a Korean War veteran, and when he was down on his luck, and we ended up down in southern Arizona in 1973, and he put us in that one-room building with no running water, no electricity, and went to look for work. We didn't let our government define us. I mean, day standard, we'd be at risk or disadvantaged. We didn't let anybody define us. We defined ourselves and said education, hard work, and don't be envious of other people. And let's see. I graduated from Shikellamy grad. I moved back here, lived with my grandmother when my parents got divorced. Shikellamy grad. Went to work in a factory. Raised my family here at the same time, starting a small business. Managing the factory I worked in. Getting elected by the members of my community to serve them in 2010. And then each time, 4 times after that, because I did what I said I was going to do. And that's an important thing. And Rick, I think you can attest to that. When you go out and talk to people, they say, Fred does what he said he'd do. Is that a true statement?
I can't comment on
You can't comment on that, but that is a true statement. But because I did that, I got elected overwhelmingly because the people of the 85th district gave me the opportunity to do that. Okay, I'm hoping the people of the 12th Congressional District will give me the opportunity to take their values to Washington, D.C. That's why I want to do it, because it's about us, we the people, defining our government, and not our government defining us, we the people. And that's the difference between the campaign that I'm running and the values I believe in, and the Green New Deal and socialized medicine that my opponent came out as the nominee, his first statement. That's the difference in these two campaigns.
Well, for given the responsibilities of you as congressman, committees, having to be in committees all the time, and various job responsibilities, do you think you'll still be as accessible to your constituents? It's got to be more difficult.
Well, if you look at some of the recommendations people gave me as a state rep, and I can point to Lee Knapp's, and Lee Knapp has been in politics for 50 years, and he said, I've never seen anybody that's as accessible as Fred or that works as hard as he does in public service. Again, as a let's go back to what the people do in the 12th Congressional District every day. They run their business, they raise their family, they volunteer in their communities, and they get it done because they work hard. They deserve somebody in Congress that's going to work just as hard as they do. And Rick, my performance, and I've proven I can do that. I proved I could do it when I ran the factory at Conestoga, had my own small business, was on the Parents Advisory Council, coached youth sports, did all this. So I did it in the private sector. I did many things in the private sector. I did it as a state rep too, as somebody elected to office, and I will continue to bring that same level of service if the people elect me to represent them from the 12th Congressional District in Washington, D.C.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred Keller, for being here. We will have this on our website until May 21st, which is the day of the primary. And we appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for listening and reading.
Okay.